Hello, everyone. What a delight it is to welcome you here into this exhibition that we cherish so much, means so much to both Marina and me at L'École. This exhibition, which will be open until February 14th. You can come, hopefully. You know, there are several people, it's constantly rephrased, but Confucius is credited with saying, acquire new knowledge and cherish the old knowledge, and you may be able to teach others. I always say, in order to teach, in order to really learn, in order to really want to learn, you must teach. And at the heart of L'École is its research department. That's essential. You must learn in order to teach. And thanks to that research department, we have this exquisite exhibition. It took years, and it also took Van Cleef & Arpels establishing the Jewelry Culture Fund to buy thousands, a collection of thousands of beautiful designs from which this exhibition was put together. Thanks to that research also, Marina and I were able to take a beautiful journey together to create the course, the new course that's a 4-hour course on jewelry design. And we, thanks to the invitation of our friend Ghislain Ockerman, who, by the way, is there to take your questions and to coordinate the discussion today, we created this talk. We have crafted this talk together for a long, long time. And we think of it as the red thread, the lucky red thread that draws you along the path in between the exhibition and the course. That is, how does a jewel happen? How does a jewel get created? I need to turn that phone off, excuse me. How does a jewel get created? We're going to have a chance today to really jump into that discussion because we have Marina here, who is a very important jewelry designer. In fact, here in the exhibition, she did something I like to call forensic jewelry design, because she looked at Lalique drawings, she looked at Prédiard drawings, and she reproduced with her paints, with her trousse, which she'll show you today, with her pouch, she reproduced completely the work that they did, step by step, because she can do that. In order to create our conference with you, we looked at a lot. We went to the Museum of Decorative Arts, we went to the Jewelry Fund of Van Cleef & Arpels, we spent a lot of time in different libraries, getting to know each other and exploring to figure out how to share with you from the beginning, from in the mind of the designer to the heart, to the hand, how does a jewel happen? To start out, we have two pictures. These two pictures, on the left you have something from Pompeii. It's from the walls of Pompeii. It's actually from a house. It's called the House of the Vetii, and it's exactly what it looks like. It's ancient, it's 2,000 years old, and it's a bunch of little cupids making jewelry. It's a jewelry workshop. Yes, do you see them? You see the little guys, this little guy with a hammer. You see the balance for weighing the gold. You see everything going on. But as we'll be doing today, we're searching for the jewelry designer. There has to be a design in order for there to be a jewel. Where's the design? Where's the designer? Is he hiding behind the workbench? Is he somewhere? Did they put him in a back room somewhere? One of the things for sure, we had some beautiful questions coming from our lovely students and friends, and one of the questions was, when did jewelry design begin? And that question is, there always was jewelry design. That's why we looked at that piece from Pompeii. There had to be jewelry design. You can't have a jewel without a design. Look at this. This is very, very rare. It's someone who I'm quite obsessed with. There was a fantastic exhibition about him at the Museum of the Renaissance, curated by Julie Roux recently. And that's Delaune, the workshop of Delaune. It's in the 1500s. Look at this magnificent, it's a whole world. It's a whole work of art created in a jewelry design. Yes, there has to be a design. This is from the 1500s. That's a side view of the ring. It's an exquisite ring with a heart-shaped stone on top. It's gone. We don't know where it is. But at least we have the design, because we have far fewer designs than we have jewels. It's a preparatory process. It's something that disappears. It's something that gets hidden, thrown away, disappears. Who knows what happens to jewelry designs? And even more than jewelry designs, where are the jewelry designers? How can we find the jewelry designers? Because if the designs are gone, how are we going to, we got one alive right here, but who designs jewelry? And where, if we don't know who they are, how do we know where they find their inspirations? And finally, once they have their inspirations, what exact techniques do they need? What mastery of gestures do they have to have? How do they execute? What tools do they use? Now, we're going to be about an hour today. So again, it's the red thread between the course and the exhibition. Even in our course of 4 hours, we don't do the whole history. We can't do the whole history of jewelry design because it's forever. We've had jewels as long as we've been human. Jewels are extremely important to being human, and obviously somebody had to design them. The thing is, today in 3 chapters, we're going to explore, using the point of view of the jewelry historian and the designer, who is a jewelry designer, starting right out with anonymity. The fact is, the jewelry designer's name is anonymous in general, capital A. Yes, jewelry design has happened forever, but mostly anonymous. For example, here we have an actual portrait of this beautiful and confident and obviously intelligent young woman who was a designer in 1795. It's her portrait in front of an ancient woman's bust, which is very interesting because that's the neoclassical period. She's in front of probably an ancient Roman woman's bust, a woman and woman, an educated, enlightened woman from the past, and this woman from 1795. Also notice her earrings. They're very, what we call classicizing, aren't they? Well, what we're interested in right here is there she is with her paper, with her pen, she's drawing, but who is she? She lives forever in the Niort Museum. Now that's not New York, that's Niort, and that's my hometown in France, N-I-O-R-T. And there's a museum called the Bernard Dagessi Museum where I discovered this painting this summer when Marina and I were working. He was a person who believed in education so much that he left his whole collection to create a teaching museum. That's in the beginning of the 1800s. We thought it was interesting to look at that piece and think about who that lady was. And then to look at a design, an anonymous design that's absolutely magnificent, that's in the Museum of Decorative Arts, that for our purposes is very interesting because it's a few years later. It couldn't have been done by that lady, but it could have been done by her daughter or her son. It has influences that look back to the 18th century, like the shell, the rocaille it's called. It has that classicism, love of ancient times, like the Pompeii mural. This is an ancient, probably cameo, which has a little cupid in it. So it's thinking of the same kinds of ideas. A cameo is a carved stone, leaving the white on top and carving so that you see the sculpture. And then it has all kinds of other details that actually make us think of the 16th century, of the Renaissance, because this is the 1800s. And in the 1800s, it's called eclecticism. Everything could be thrown in with much love. It's kind of fertilizing the soil for all that's going to happen in the future. And of course, Marina and I couldn't resist because we love, both of us, the way the painting was done, especially the pearls. Look at how you can see, and by the way, Marina teaches a class on that too. She teaches 2 classes. There's one on the lights, which is, this is the lights, how the light hits the stone, and then there's one on the color, which is the body of this is the pearl in this case. And also, I think we love this, you had mentioned, because you like the way this person did black ink wash, right? They washed the whole thing with black ink, which means no...
Because at the time we couldn't buy leaves already paint. So all the creator and designer had to paint the wash of the background.
There we are. We're jumping right into what we're going to do today, which is not just the what, the who, but also the how. Staying with the subject of the who. Who were these designers? Those of you who know me, I can never resist telling you that some of the greatest painters and architects and sculptors of all time, the ones that live forever in the pantheon of our imaginations, were goldsmiths and jewelers. Holbein is one. If we think of Holbein, we think probably of Henry VIII and his many wives, and how Henry VIII had Holbein really be his propaganda master, making him ever more glorious with all his jewels, which of course led Henry VIII, by the time he died, to be almost bankrupt, which meant that all his fabulous jewels, yes, Holbein was his painter, but Holbein was also his jewelry designer. So virtually all those fabulous jewels had to be sold. And if they had to be sold, the English love inventories, they had to do an inventory. Thank heavens they did, because they searched for his jewels. They found that the jewels were squirreled away in the Tower of London in a casket. And in that casket was a book of jewelry designs. A book of jewelry designs, which obviously was treasured as much as the jewelry itself by Holbein. Thanks to that book, we have this design for this beautiful jeweled belt. You can go to the British Museum website, you can search for yourself, and you can see the designs that remain from the jewelry book. Holbein obviously designed hundreds, if not, we don't know how many jewels Holbein designed. Loads and loads and loads of jewels. Look at these details, right? All right, look at those details. And now look at the detail of the painting. This is a painting of Venus and her son Cupid, a very serious painting that he did almost like the way he did the portraits of the royals. I think it's the most serious Venus and Cupid I've ever seen. But for us, we're fascinated because of that belt. Because if we look at the detail of the belt, what do we see? We see exactly, virtually, the design that Holbein made. There's proof of examples of how Holbein's designs of his jewelry also went into his painting. And I could cite other examples for you: Cellini, Ghirlandaio, Botticelli, Ghiberti, Brunelleschi, architects, sculptors, painters. We'll do that another day. We focused on Holbein as a great master known for his really political paintings to give us an example of how jewelry designers were there, they were everywhere. We just have to really be detectives to find them. Now, on that subject, jewelry designers could be all kinds of people, and jewelry design could be used for all kinds of reasons. Let's start with the piece on the right, which Marina picked from the Museum of Decorative Arts library.
So in the 19th century, we could see on the right a beautiful plate with different pendants made by a special designer. Indeed, if you look at the note which goes with it, you could read, this is pendants composition of Mr. Melmesen, architect at Graz in Germany. So we could have the proof with this example that all the designers of jewelry designer were not only jewelry designer, they came from other disciplines, and many others at this time, until today.
And as we had this exchange with each other, we took a really lovely journey of discovery together for over a year preparing our discussion with you today. We had side by side, while Marina was finding this with its beautiful ribbon flourishes and it's very architecturally constructed, I was in another book finding this. I knew about it, but it just struck me again when I found it in an old book written by Paolo Giovo about symbols, signs and symbols. So badges, symbols of family rank, and also romantic symbols. He put that all together in a book in the 1500s. And he felt it was extremely important to show this symbol. And I had never seen it before with all those ribbons circling around it. Now this is a symbol you find everywhere connected with the great Lorenzo de' Medici of Florence, even on the gate going to his palace, so architecturally even. And what is it? It's jewelry design. It's 3 rings with diamonds intertwined. So jewelry design can stand for a noble family, an extremely important person of the Renaissance. Jewelry design can be made by people who are not of that profession. Jewelry designers are absolutely everywhere. And inspiration for jewelry design can even be found with Leonardo da Vinci.
Yes, indeed. We ask us, who is the designer? It's the question we had in this exhibition too. in the course also. And my definition of a designer is first, the designer of jewelry had to be a very good designer. And second, he has to observe the world and makes a transformation of his observations in volume. So I was doing an exhibition just before the lockdown. It was the last exhibition I have done. And I was very surprised because amongst many sketchbooks of Leonardo da Vinci, I saw a special tool he uses in the 15th century, but we use also in our in my métier,
your profession.
My profession. So, do you recognize it? Indeed, we could think that it looks like a compass, but it's not a compass. It's a dry point. And this dry point has many uses.
And you have one right here, yours, right out of your pouch.
I bring it today to show what is it. It didn't change since the 15th century.
So more than 600 years ago.
Yeah, and finally I use it today, and I think designer of jewelry uses it today, and many other artists too. But to do what? What do you think we could do with a special tool like it, made to measure everything? So, for example, we could measure the measurement of the stones, the measurements of the ring, if we have to do a special scale of a client, for example. And we could report this measure on the paper to do the final gouache. And I think Leonardo da Vinci uses it today too, to make all the research he made on the face, for example, of a proportion, like where to put the eyes, where to put the nose. He has to measure with his tool. And he makes lots of different research, like in the other page with botany, because he was a great botanist. And you could see this beautiful flower made with fountain pen, which illustrates the famous quote he had with his students. He says always, go in nature and take your lesson in the nature.
So Leonardo da Vinci, this was the great once-in-a-lifetime exhibition that we had a chance both to go to in the Louvre right before the lockdown. Leonardo da Vinci said, find your inspiration from nature. And Leonardo da Vinci used the same tools that Marina uses today. And again, this juxtaposition in front of you is something we found together as we made our journeys through our memories, our knowledge, even our phones, because you had a picture of this, and then we asked Thomas Farber to send us from his collection a better picture that was taken by his family. And you would like to tell us something about the revelations of these two pieces, right?
Yes. So if we do like Leonardo da Vinci, we could observe beautiful flowers. And this one is particularly wild and fragile. It's a wild poppy made by black ink with a fountain pen. And I think when you are a jewelry designer, you have to ask you, how can I do a beautiful jewel with this particular flower?
And here, I guess these little cut-ins, these are ideas that the designer had for this. This is an original piece of work that Marina found while she was invited into the archives of the Museum of Decorative Art. So these are designs that are over 100 years old that she went through in big archival boxes. And she thought about that, and that caused her to think about this piece, the Farber collection piece.
Because finally, this question, how to do a jewel with a very fragile and gracile flower, is the question of Paul Legrand. Paul Legrand was a designer of bûcheron in the 19th century. He was designing this beautiful rose hip flower, which turns around the neck. But before to do it, if he think of it, and he was thinking, how I would like to do this flower, this necklace with an open, in form of a question mark, but without a clasp. So he made this first sketch in 1879, but he had to wait 10 years more because he had to wait that all the jewelers of the bûcheron team find the mechanism to do exactly the same design than he designed.
It's very important what Marina is saying, because that's the fact that the design and the designer and the jeweler are a team, and there's a giant team of jewelers that make something like this happen. So the design is there's always a design. There can't be something like this fantastic question mark piece, which won the Gold Award at the 1889 exhibition, the same exhibition that celebrated the building of the Eiffel Tower, for example. And it took 10 years for a whole team of brilliant jewelers to invent what was necessary to invent to make this design come to life, because a design has to be read the same way a plan for a house is read. A jewelry design could be very beautiful, but if it can't be read and can't be constructed, it's like having a design for a beautiful house that's gorgeous, but when the builders follow the plans, the house falls down. It's not such a good design then. A jewelry design has to be a functioning plan for something to be built and created. And that causes us also to look at jewelry designs in terms of how are they built and created? How do we move toward the modern aesthetic of maisons having their identity, and maisons even having a specific identity in the kind of design they make, even the way their teams do their gouache. There's a touch to it nowadays, distinctive. We thought it was great to take a look back again through some of our discoveries from the library of the Museum of Decorative Arts, and in this case, Ostertag, a maison sometimes forgotten, but as you can see from these glorious designs, it was at the height of glamour during the 1920s, the Art Deco period. This is a page from the catalog of an exhibition that I think Marina and I both imagine we would have loved to have been to. 1929 in the Palais Galliera, the Modern Jeweler and Goldsmith exhibition. Now, for the page explaining what they do, they showed their designs. So designs can be to create a jewel, that's what we're saying, like the plans for a house, but they need to be a work of art that can stand on its own. And they also are important witnesses to us, where we can look through to the past and see how beautiful lost designs were. Very poignant, because they show the hand, eye, and heart of these designers like Marina, but we don't know who they are, who worked together to create an aesthetic for a maison. And they're there to show us what those jewels look like. Because look, wouldn't you love to see that one with the giant sapphire and those exquisite carved emerald and sapphire leaves? Look at this one that looks like a garden gate with a trellis of blooming flowers on it. Where are those jewels? Now there's another way that and this looks almost like a ram's horn. That's another way that the design can be an incredible witness, because someday, maybe even someone watching this talk may find that jewel in their grandmother's jewelry box and may say, oh my goodness, I have this Ostertag jewel. So there's one thing, works of art, witnesses, a moment in history at the Musée Galliera, you see it says, but also designs themselves, drawn designs, can be very effective communication and can again give us a window into the past to see the culture. Here is a design that was an advertisement for the same maison. And look at this elegant, gorgeous lady. That's a photograph, and then she's photographed looking at designs, at drawings. Elegant, gorgeous lady. You see how the jewels were worn. You feel like you can go back and almost know her through time, but all about different ways jewelry designs can function as an artwork. We've talked about, all right, we went a little bit on a quest, who is the designer? And again, we have the treat, a real treat for the historian, for the jewelry historian, to have a designer with us who's also very good at explaining her work and very good at researching and decrypting other people's work, even back to the 1400s, even back to Leonardo. So we're going to take advantage of that to ask her questions. By the way, our friend Ghislain is there with the questions that he's monitoring, and whether you're choosing the simultaneous translation in Chinese, Japanese, or Mandarin, no matter what, Ghislain and our friends in Hong Kong are taking your questions, and we can answer your questions at the end. Think about that, because boy, I'll tell you, when you ask Marina questions, you get some amazing answers. It causes her to think, and it causes her to share with you all kinds of insights that I think you've already had the privilege of sharing quite a few interesting insights from Marina. So asking Marina and traveling with Marina and traveling with our research, where do the inspirations come from? Well, Marina likes to take creative walks. She even organizes a hiking club.
Yes. So before to do jewelry, all designers must think about their ideas, and we try to capture all the ideas which are in the air and around us. So I use a lot sketchbooks like this, and I bring it one today. You could see on the right. It's an angel I made during a walk in Paris, because it was a beautiful body, beautiful wings too. So I wanted to do it for the pleasure to do something very beautiful. And I made it with a special tool. I bring it today. It's a felt tip brush pen, you could see, with two points.
And these are 3 subtle colors of gray,
yeah.
right?
And to do that, I use only 3 colors of gray. And it's like watercolors, but it's not watercolors because it's a brush pen.
I would like to look at a detail directly from her notebook right here before we look at our next image and look at the wings. Again, from the jewelry historian's point of view, we have the first-hand testimony of Marina, and now we look at how she rendered those wings, the movement. What she was fascinated with was the movement, as you can see. She also manages to register the sentiment and the emotion in the statue. But let's think about the movement, and let's think about the sculptural quality of her work, right? The way she transcribes the sculpture. Because our next image is something that we found together and agreed on in the Jewelry Culture Fund of Van Cleef & Arpels when Clementine Vialar, the curator, took us through. And we chose, these are things no one has seen since the day they were collected over 100 years ago. And this is a design we pulled out from there to share with you today, because look, the inspirations are all different sculptures from ancient times probably, and movement, like wing movements. What Marina noticed was the movement, and what I noticed was the picking up of inspiration from sculpture.
Yeah.
And you constantly pointed out the movement, that you feel like these figures are moving. For instance, this dancing Maenad, probably from ancient Greece, playing her music, you see the movement. The designer sees, captures, and puts it down, as you always say. We've spent so much time together, we can finish each other's sentences. The next one that we chose, again together, is more conceptual. This is more, what is it exactly? What did you like about this, and what made you think of your sculptural drawing?
In fact, when you are inspired by something, you have many ways to do jewelry. Mm-hmm. The first one is very figurative, as we saw with the angel, on the body, on the movement. And now we could do something more symmetrical, more formal.
And more conceptual.
More
because
conceptual.
Where are the wings? There are wings, but it's more in the movement of the wings, right?
So we could see a beautiful symmetry, like the rings of the angel.
And we, of course, picked up on the pearls and the way the pearls are painted. We loved, again, to look at details of the painting, because we're both real fans on the individual ways in which different designers render the stones, the pearls, and even the pavé. We enjoy sort of reading and decrypting that. Again, we put side by side one of Marina's sculptural drawings and a jewel. tell us about this sculptural drawing. What did you love about this, and why did you stop in front of this fountain and give us this sketch?
This time I was walking in Paris too, near Luxembourg Park, and I saw a beautiful fountain called the Fourth Continent. And I was attracted by all the animals, bestiary, because in fact, in Boucheron, before in Boucheron, I was doing lots of animal jewelry, and each time I'm seeing something with an animals, I'm attracted. So I made this part of the fountain with a turtle, horse, who are playing with water, and you could see after that I made lots of animals.
Well, it's something we share. We both love animals. We discovered a lot about each other during the confinement, and actually this whole talk, we have a special treat and surprise at the center of this talk that comes from that. You love animals, and you have a way of showing the movement of animals, an exquisite modern look, which reminds me again of that cherishing old knowledge and seeking new. Like Confucius said, you may have the privilege to teach others, because the greatest honor is indeed to teach others. And this movement, the way you capture it, made us think, both of us, of a jewel that's obsessed me for a long time at the Louvre, which I love to show my students, which is a jewel that's very controversial, believe it or not. It looks 1500s, and the ticket on it says 1500s, and it says it's an ancient cameo. It is indeed an ancient cameo, which looks so much like that sculpture. We have this swimming goddess next to the sea-going horse creature with it's part horse, part sea creature with its tail twirling, and you feel all the movement in the water. Again, a cameo. The white stone on top is what's left, and they carve underneath to the pink to give you the background. Ancient cameo, which says signed Sostratos, but that's incredibly controversial. We won't even touch that today. This looks like the 1500s. It's very much that style, but it's probably a pastiche put together much later, interestingly enough. And which makes it kind of fun, because it's also kind of modern, but it's modern with all bits and pieces from the past. When we look at the back is probably actual existing real from the 1500s, from that Delon workshop we talked about. And on the back, a piece that's mixing antique and ancient. Look at the design coming from Etienne Delon, probably. Look at these fairies. Look at all this kind of swirling movement, these little insects, all this kind of sculptural festoons with enamel and gold. Very interesting, because that's the Renaissance. Everyone agrees, even the debating art historians agree that that is Renaissance 1500s, but you could think it was Art Nouveau, which is one of the reasons why Art Nouveau is also very important to any jewelry designer, because Art Nouveau is a moment when jewelry design gets its nobility back. It had that nobility in the Renaissance. In fact, in the Renaissance, a goldsmith was even higher status than an architect, a sculptor, or a painter. Ghiberti, you may have signed up and stood in line to see Ghiberti's doors in Florence. Ghiberti boasted in his memoirs, not about his winning his prizes for his sculpture. No, he boasted about jewels that he'd made for the Medicis. And we find that's really important, because Marina will tell you her influences, her inspiration to be a jewelry designer comes from Art Nouveau. And Art Nouveau, one of the sort of tenets of Art Nouveau is it's the renaissance. That's the rebirth of the rebirth. And that's why we made a deliberate choice. Now, those of you who like your chronology may be saying, what are they doing here? They have an Art Nouveau architecture next to an Art Deco jewelry study. Why?
So we start with a choice with this door, beautiful door from Brussels, because I was discovering Brussels, Art Nouveau in Brussels, because it's very famous for the Art Nouveau art. So I was designing in watercolors this door with a beautiful stained glass window, which represents stylized flowers. And when I draw this door on these stained glass windows, I found after this beautiful composition of earrings on the right, which are a research of composition with flowers. So it could be the inspiration of these earrings, as explained in Inezita, because of a style, very stylist.
Now, architecture and jewelry are so related, as we've been discussing from the beginning. The plans for a jewel are like the plans for a house, but also architecture influences jewelry, and maybe jewelry influences architecture also. We discussed that quite a bit with Ghislain in our New York architecture and French Art Deco jewels talk. In this case, the Art Nouveau is way before the Art Deco. We're talking 1900 versus the mid-1920s. So we're talking at least 25 years difference. Did someone take the same walk in Brussels that you're talking about in the 1920s and think of these earrings? But maybe.
Finally, it's only 10 years between the
yes,
both.
That's true.
It's not a lot.
That's true. So maybe it could have even been someone who had seen it as a child and then made the earrings when they were, but you can see how it's those are earrings, but they're very architectural. There's a word we love to use, architectonic. And it's just one of those words that art historians like to play with. But that's why we deliberately juxtapose those two pieces, because in Art Nouveau, there's the rebirth of appreciating jewelry as an art form. And in the 1920s, it's full out. Raymond Templier, all the others, that's why we have that appreciation of jewelry as an art form equal to all the others in the Art Deco period too. Now, we continued this walk, this promenade, through Marina's sketchbooks, which she very generously, by the way, this is part of educating about art design, is that not a lot of people will share so generously. No, she let me sort of rummage through her sketchbooks with her. And there are not all that many people who do that. And one of the reasons why jewelry design disappears and all kinds of preparatory work disappears is a lot of artists leave instructions. They want their preparatory work destroyed. They only want the final piece. That was very much the tradition before modern art. Modern art celebrates the process. So Marina let us celebrate the process with her by picking designs from her sketchbook, and then the two of us, the jewelry historian and the artist together, picked pieces that were made that reflected some of the inspirations. Where does the inspiration come from? In this case, these chestnuts, this autumnal theme. Tell us about it.
It's a watercolor of chestnut I made on the last autumn. And I think this theme could inspire to Lalique, which was very inspired by nature. And he made this beautiful comb we could see on the right with the same theme, with hazelnuts made in enamel and horn, a beautiful leaf with lots of volume.
So those are hazelnuts. You almost feel like you could pick them and roast them and eat them, but it's all made with horn and gold. There's horn and gold involved here. Yeah, and that leaf is a leaf that fell off a tree, that's crackled, that's folded, that's drying out. All of that, he renders all that in a piece of jewelry for the hair. It's a comb for the hair. And Marina and I made that choice of how you can make the observation from nature, and then someone like Lalique could bring it to life in a jewel like this. We have chestnuts on one side and hazelnuts on another, but it's autumn. It's the autumn theme. Then there's wheat. So how could certainly in the West, we can't live without our wheat. Yeah. Bread comes from wheat, life comes from wheat. It's called sometimes the shaft of life. And Marina took this picture on one of her walks, on one of her hikes.
Yes, because this time I was attracted by a part of a shield, very beautiful, with some wheat, very blend, which are moving and blend under their own weight. So it makes graphic curves on shapes, very beautiful. That we could see that this inspiration inspired to Lalique at the same moment. With we could see the wheat under their bent.
This piece is right here in the exhibition. It's a design that I don't think anyone had seen before this exhibition. It's published also in the catalog, and it's an exquisite design which Marina revealed to us as a teacher is very interesting because it shows a lot of things. First of all, how he worked. If you want to tell us about how he worked. Here's the wheat that looks just like your photograph.
For example, you could see on left that he was searching all the model of a tiara. You could see the pen, the pencil, the gray pen. On the right, he made the finalization.
Right, so he did all his work here.
So in fact,
this is basically his scratch pad.
In fact, in all design of Lalique, you could see all the steps of the creation of a model.
Sketching on the bottom, even the mechanism, the side views, and then there are notes on this one. It's all the more precious when they're actual notes. And the notes are quite charming. The notes say that Mrs. Marasoff's emeralds must be observed and that the piece must have the exact same color in the enamel work as Mrs. Marasoff's emeralds on her other bracelet. So there's a lot of project involved here, of realization, plans, but also there's gold stones. He says yellow stones, we don't know if they were diamonds or sapphires, are to be used for the wheat. And look at how much the wheat is almost identical to Marina's photograph. This is just a kind of what we call a serendipity. Now there's another design which you picked out in the Museum of Decorative Arts, which is for the center plaque for a dog collar, for a lady's neck. There would be pearls around it and it would be tight on the neck. And this, of course, is bringing an opportunity to talk again about the design.
It's the same inspiration and the same movement you could see on the tiara on this central plaque.
So two completely different designs, two completely different places.
With the same inspiration.
But carrying out that same story. And what's interesting is even the attachment. If you look here, I notice the attachment is like sheaves of wheat. It's like the sheaves of wheat that you talked about, and then the pearls will be behind that. It's just amazing. We made this journey, it was a discipline that we followed, of working from her sketchbook, selecting pieces that we thought would be interesting for you, that would reveal aspects of the inspiration for jewelry design, and then searching through hundreds, most likely, thousands maybe, of different designs everywhere to find designs for actual jewelry and actual pieces of jewelry that showed how these designs could, how these inspirations could come to life. Now we have two objects that might surprise you. A design that's thanks to Benedict Gatti at the Museum of Decorative Arts, and the photos by our friend Paul Paradis, and then also a Van Cleef & Arpels ring that's quite conceptual. Tell us about it, Marina.
About I was doing this thistle in watercolors, so you could see I was inspired by the colors and the structure of this flower. So we could use even the colors, even the structure to do a creation of jewelry.
And you also were fascinated by the way the flower is attracting this bee, right? The colors, the superb mauves, purples, pinks, and blues of a thistle, the profile aspect of the thistle, the sculptural aspect of the thistle made you choose not a thistle in terms of the fouquet, but you had this actual drawing in your hands. You chose another purple flower, but that's looked at sculpturally from the side, that becomes very sculptural against a sort of almost an Islamic moon motif, but it's the juxtaposition of shapes and sculpture. And of course, the way the purples and mauves attract the bee. And here is the bee greedily feeding on the pollen upside down, because he's got to get to the pollen in this beautifully curving design for a very, very big pin, which exists. It's in the Victoria and Albert.
And in the opposite, I chose this beautiful ring of Van Cleef & Arpels with beautiful pink sapphires, which evokes the center of flowers, very pink.
And you also thought that this sculptural aspect was like the...
Yeah. And I choose this ring because it's very modern, and we could imagine easily that it's the profile of thistle.
And the name of it is? is thistle ring. It's titled that, so you understood, looking at that, you understood the motivation of the designer who designed that as thistle ring. Quite frankly, when I first looked at it, I didn't. And I offered Marina dozens of actual thistle jewels. And she turned them down. She said, no, boring, I like that. So it's completely conceptual. She loved the fact that the designer was ignited by the same kind of tantalizing pinkness and pollinated fresh life that attracted the bee and that attracted you in the design that you made on the left. So I particularly adore this floral inspiration slide because it really goes all over the place, but it also shows us how the design process can go all over the place. Now here, with these birds, we have a much more linear and in its own, both are extremely delighting to me as the jewelry historian. One is how the designer can ping pong around, ricochet from one thing to another. And the other one is how the designer can really follow a very specific red thread that leads right from an observation, a chance observation, to a very successful, very important high jewelry jewel.
On this time, I was in the greenhouses of Auteuil, and I saw beautiful exotic birds. I made one grooming itself. And I like the movement always of these rings and feathers. And just a few months after,
If I may for a moment though, also notice how Marina always captures the spirit of an animal. You feel like these animals are going to talk to you.
I made it with watercolors. I always bring the small box of watercolors to capture the colors around me.
I know these didn't become jewels, but I can't resist these two. These animals, they look like you can hear them sing. And this little guy, you can see how much he's enjoying. He's preening. It's what we call preening. He's beautiful, he knows it, and he's preening his feathers, which is of course very important for birds for their health. They are actually cleaning and smoothing their feathers so that their feathers will repel rain when it rains. Yes. But all that becomes a very dynamic, curving motif. And let's focus on what Marina does the next year.
And finally,
a year later,
the same year, in fact, I was looking for new animals jewelry for bûcherons, and I studied this cockatoo with around a sapphire, a yellow sapphire, and you could see that they could have the same movement, the same dynamics, because he's like roaming itself.
What I love is that now that space, that shoulder of the bird, which is actually the part that was poking out at us when you did observing from life, that shoulder, that movement now becomes an actual gem, becomes a golden sapphire. I love this one.
And I do several colors, several shape, and finally we choose this one. His name is Nouri, is the name of a bird. It was made finally with beautiful blue sapphires, because we had a beautiful blue sapphires in the stock.
Which just shows you once again, as the jewelry historian, often I love the one that wasn't made. But the one that was made is made for different reasons. It's the same thing we teach. I spent a year in Cartier archives going through one of the best times of my life, going through from A to Z, all the clients for my job. And I couldn't believe what a wonderful job going through all the designs. And I saw often that the one that wasn't produced could be the most beautiful. And we also teach the children in our children's workshops. We say that you're going through the exact process, because the children will be saying, I want a huge emerald for that, and we can't find a rhinestone that's a huge emerald. I say, well, like Marina, in the real world, there was a lovely sapphire, so you're going to take the beautiful sapphire.
I prefer yellow sapphires for that
but you made this, which is a beautiful piece.
Finally, but it's okay because the eyes is blue too.
And it's exquisite. It's lovely, and you love it. But knowing the whole story behind it is another part of the artwork. The jewelry design is an artwork that's extremely important. It's as itself. It's almost like a whole drama, a whole story, a whole theater of how something like this came to be. All what's behind it. In this case, we have also. I'll show you this one first. This one was done with a Mexican fire opal.
On some years after, I made this cockatoo with around the fire opals, with garnets and orange sapphires too. But this one is most Art Deco.
More static. He's more static.
Yeah, more
but this
static.
one, we end with our discussion with this one is picking up on the movement of the wing. Remember, we're talking about movements of wings, even from the beginning, from our fountains and our winged horses. In this case, it's from the Secret collection from Van Cleef & Arpels, and it actually has a movable wing. So here's a case where the designer dreams of under her wing. It's the mother bird or the father bird, under the wing, it could be the father bird, sheltering the baby. See that? And that means that the jeweler designed that, the designer dreamed that up, but the team of jewelers, probably 40 different people, had to make that happen with the mystery setting, with the wing that worked, and all of that to make that piece come to life. So there's the inspiration, but then there's the work of the jewelers making it come to life. So when there's been the inspiration, when there's someone who's a designer who takes those walks through everywhere in the world, looking, constantly seeking inspiration, going to nature like Leonardo da Vinci said, looking for his design, going to Pompeii, looking at the walls of the houses. When something happens in the mind, and then the heart, or in the heart first, or the mind, we don't know which first, in the eyes, from the eyes to the mind to the heart. Yes. How does the technique roll out? Well, here's something that did happen. It happened during confinement. It happened during the worst, scariest part of it. Remember March, April, May, especially March. It actually was starting in March. Marina is in the mountains of Auvergne with her dad, if I may. She goes to what matters to her. I'm in Kittery, Maine with my husband, who's a doctor working in 4 different hospitals. I'm absolutely terrified every day he goes to work. What's going to happen? We are finding our solace in working on building this beautiful design course. So we're not thinking of this talk at all. We're thinking of our 4-hour design course. We're peaufiner is the French word. We're polishing, polishing, polishing. And we take pauses to look at our Instagrams, and Marina noticed that I'm feeding a squirrel that I've nicknamed Edmund. And Edmund and his whole family gets bigger and bigger. They keep bringing different squirrels. It's now like 20 squirrels that are there, and I'm putting out pounds and pounds of nuts every day. My husband stops on his way home from the hospital and brings big bags of nuts. And Marina starts asking me, how's Edmund? And she loves the pictures of Edmund. So I send her all kinds of pictures. These are 2 of them. And little did I know that an inspiration is growing in Marina's mind. She didn't even tell me. So what was happening in your mind with Edmund?
In fact, on winter, I was looking for doing something new with new animals of winter. And I was searching different animals. But finally, I made some sketches. You could see I made a mouse, I made a bird. And finally, I made the squirrel Edmund, because finally I found it was the most mignon. Cute. Mignon. The most cute to do a new jewel with a squirrel.
That's 2 views of Edmund. We put 2 because we wanted to show you she chose, by the way, Marina went through hundreds of Edmund photos, and she chose these 2 because these 2 were the ones she felt she observed when she thought of this. So now we have a sketch for the Edmund jewel.
So I start to do Edmund eating a ruby this time.
Yes, it's not a walnut anymore, it's a ruby, because he prefers walnuts.
On a branch, a pine branch, under the snow.
Because we have all kinds of pine branches out the window, and I had sent you many pictures of him hanging from pine branches. And we looked also at other, excuse me, I want to do this first. We looked at other jewels that had made with squirrels. When Marina showed me her design, I thought of one that I adore for a long, long time for many reasons. First of all, I love animals, but this is William Rooser. It's all kinds of reasons to love William Rooser. He's from nowhere, becomes a great Hollywood designer for Hollywood people. Joan Crawford, all the great stars buy his pieces and wear his pieces. And he makes something magical with freshwater, natural American pearls. Why? Because he simply got a hold of a box of these pearls wrapped up in cotton, and they inspired him to start creating these constructions, these creations out of natural pearls. Indeed, that tail is one freshwater American natural pearl. The body, the flowers, each petal is a freshwater American natural pearl. And the squirrel is eating something involving ruby pave, which makes us think very much of Marina's design. Not at all, but very much. And that's exactly the joy of comparing design and doing this detective work as to what is jewelry design. So here is
the final gouache.
He doesn't exist yet.
No.
No one's made him yet. I think it's going to be very challenging, that ruby, because that ruby is like a walnut, but it's a ruby, and it's got to be briolette cut all the way around. It's going to be tough. So this is another example where you find an exquisite design and now you need to make it. And someone has to be fantastic at the round pavé for his cute, chubby little body, which is chubby because I overfed him. Now, oh, what happened? Oh, I went, sorry, I do this sometimes. Oh, no. Sorry. I wanted the video. Why did I? Oh, that's why. Sorry. I want to share with you the video, and I should have showed you the video first. Why is it not? No, I didn't play. I want to play the video. Sorry. This is what I wanted to play for you. That's live TV. I wanted to play the video for you because Marina made a huge series of videos for us, for me actually. At that time it was just personal between the two of us, showing how she painted Edmund. And we thought it was great to share with you. Here you have the story really comes to fruition. The idea, the picture, the animal, and now the actual hand of Marina as she paints the gouache for Edmund.
Yes, we are in the first type of final gouache. I put all the fillet of pink gold before to make the setting of the squirrel.
And there you're putting the diamonds.
And then I could put diamonds, brown diamonds, cognac diamonds, or brown sapphires.
Which is fascinating to look at because now you see the actual process coming to life. That's why I wanted to show you that video. Now moving on, this is something that Marina put together actually in the Museum of Decorative Arts side by side as we were working together. Marina found this design that she loved, and then we looked together at a piece that's in the Gallery de Bijoux. It's an actual piece on the right that you can go and visit in the Gallery de Bijoux in the museum. It's huge, it's like this. And it was exposed at the 1889 exhibition, that one that also marked the Tour Eiffel being, the Eiffel Tower being exposed for the first time. And it's also the one where the question mark necklace was. And this was all paved with loads and loads of diamonds by the Weber brothers. After the exhibition, they took the diamonds out. So that's the structure in silver for this magnificent, huge corsage ornament. That would have been all in the front. The lady would have worn it on the front of her dress. Marina wants to tell you what she noticed about the design that she found in the archives compared to that jewel.
Finally, I chose this beautiful ornament, corsage ornament with a rose, because of the beauty of this jewelry, but also because of the beauty of the hand, the gouache, the diamond gouache, because finally all the designer has got his own hand and made the diamonds from different ways. But this way is particularly interesting because it's very contrasting and very bright too. And you could see that all the diamonds are made just with round, without any facets. So it's quite surprising to see something so bright without any facets. And we could see also the background of each leaves in transparency. So he has got a beautiful technique to draw each diamonds very quickly too and very precise.
And what we liked about the two side by side was here you can see, in a way, see through the design to the structure. You can see through the design to the freedom that the designer had in this point in time of having his individuality. You can recognize his style. And then on the jewel on the right, the actual jewel that has the diamonds already pulled out, you can see the structure in a very poetic way. The diamonds are gone, but you can see the structure. So what is underneath the jewel? What is behind the jewel? What is behind that finished perfect impression that you have in a jewel in terms of the design and then the structure that carries it out.
And I like to see this step because usually this step, all the clients doesn't see this work.
Exactly.
You can imagine and see what's the works of a jeweler who have to do each wall for a diamond. So at the end, it's like a frame, a beautiful frame.
Exactly. And here we have another example of the preliminary work and then a final work that you found in two completely different places. And this was by the famous maison that's again a memory, which is Saatchi.
Yes. Here you could see two plates. One plate on the left with a research of different pendants. They are made with color wash. And you could see on the left two models I selected to show you the process of creation. For example, this one, the triangle one, has got two spirals and a different motif on the right side. And at the end, the designer decided to make something more symmetrical with only one spiral on the top. And you could see the beautiful gouache too, the final gouache, very precise, very bright, with gouache.
You can see the red is going to be lacquer. You can even see the shine and the curve. You know the lacquer needs to curve up. You can see that the pavé diamonds have to be very close together. You can even see the bead setting. Everything, like you say, now is a work of art that's also very specifically readable as the plan for the jewel, right? Which, speaking of plans for jewels and readable, tell us about this. Why did this surprise you and delight you so much?
I like very much this design of Templier brooch because he uses many tricks of designers. And I would like to thank the calc.
Tracing paper. Special kind of tracing paper, very specific designer's tracing paper. Right?
So I use a lot of the tracing paper, and we use a lot tracing paper because there is many qualities. The first quality is the transparency. So we could work on transparency when we find a model. We can paint the final gouache on the tracing paper, and we can remove it by scratching if there's something wrong. But here, that I selected, that I see, was his utilization of both sides of the paper, because he paints on the first side this beautiful brooch, and on the other side he paints the shadow which underlines the pin very well. So it's a trick we usually doesn't see everywhere because it's secret trick of a designer.
Now this is the great Roman Templier, who was the secretary of the Union d'Artistes Modernes. The Union d'Artistes Modernes, the UAM, involved architects, sculptors, artists, all kinds of painters, and Templier, who is known as the architect of jewelers, is a key person in that group. And he really paints in a very architectural way his jewels, and his jewels are constructed that way. And this is his Templier signature, which is interesting because, again, there's a giant fund of his work in the Museum of Decorative Arts, which we were able to research in. And I think you discovered that. I don't think anyone had looked at that design before. It's a timeless art form. And what we mean by a timeless art form is it's an art form that's coming back into a well-deserved spotlight, as with this exhibition. I'm going to take you a little bit on a tour of that with some inside pictures in a minute. It's something that was reborn during the Art Nouveau and Art Deco period, reborn like rebirth, Renaissance from the Renaissance. Jewelers and goldsmiths were of an incredibly high stature always, and now they are again, as they deserve. And the jewelry design has the stature it deserves today. We thought that it was good to show the timelessness and to sort of do what the French call boucler la boucle, that means buckling the buckle, to show the husky jewel and how the husky jewel came to life in Marina's hands.
Yes. we would like to summarize all the steps of creations, and I present you this bracelet of a husky, a wolf dog, which is the name is Laika, made for the winter collection of Boucheron. And I have to make a dog, a wolf, sleeping on the banks of a shore of Lake Baikal. And we could see on the side, on the profile side, so I began to make a sketch, this sketch made with a pencil and made with des crayons de couleur.
Colored pencils.
Colored pencils. I made the tree view because usually when we make something in volume, we have to think in tree view and we have to design the rings and the bracelets in tree views. So you could see the top view. On the top view, you could see the lock in transparency inside the rock crystal. You could see the view of the face view with a wolf. And you could see the profile view with a lock on the side. After this tree view, this design of tree view, we ask the help of a sculptor modeler to make a sculpture of the fur of this dog because it was a volume very particular. So I had after to do this sculpture of the fur of a dog, I do again four views with all details of the setting of the stones to have a beautiful gradation between the white and the black and between from the white diamonds until the black diamonds and sapphires.
I love the sculpturing that you and the sculptor actually work together. And look at how the sculpturing makes you see his shoulders, makes you see his head perched on the ice. The whole thing comes to life because of that cooperation. And underneath the ice is going to be a watch, right?
Yes, and at the end I could do the final wash. This one is in perspective, so we could do like in the reality.
And in reality, it came to life and it was this. So there is the whole red thread bringing us all the way through, from the observation to the ice and the lake. And that brings us back to where we started, buckling the buckle again, because it brings us to this exhibition and it brings us back to Pompeii. How's that? On the right over there, that's a blow-up, a huge blow-up, high-def picture of a tiny painting. This is from Pompeii to Paillet. Paillet was a French designer, P-A-I-L-L-E-T, who made these meticulous, tiny little paintings that would be watch faces or bandeaus for bracelets. And that is a blow-up of one of his designs, and we put it next to the Pompeii wall painting because where does the jeweler find his inspiration? How does he work meticulously? Where does he travel? I'm sure Paillet must have gone to Pompeii, and for me, he must have seen the house of the Vetii, because these frolicking little cupids remind me of those playful cupids making the jewelry. And this is how jewelry design inspiration can come from everywhere. The workmanship is the workmanship of great art, and how investigating the mysteries also causes us to make some really delightful discoveries. Look at these details. That's teeny tiny. And just to end, I thought I would show you a couple of pictures of inside the exhibition. Here we have a couple of pictures of inside the exhibition because we would like to have you remember that we're very happy to be inside the exhibition, and we hope maybe you could plan a trip and come to see us, but we wanted you to get a look of what's inside the exhibition and an idea of what it looks like. And now we would very much like to ask you for your questions. And we would like you to think about upcoming talks because there's the exquisite exhibition of La Cloche in Hong Kong. We hope you're going to definitely get to that. It's an extremely important exhibition celebrating Art Deco, which we talked about quite a bit today. And there's going to be a talk with Nicola Luxinger and with Mathilde, our dear Mathilde Rondoin from the school, that will explore the saga of La Cloche Jewelers on December 16th and 17th. So we'd like you to know about that, and then we'd also like to take a couple of minutes to take a couple of questions. I think Gisela is going to send us some questions and we'll see what you may have. For years, many brands all around the world have been designing jewels in their studios with software such as Illustrator, Photoshop, or Rhino. What do you think about this jewelry design's modernization? Does this improve the design? Does it worsen it? With organic and the magic around the world process, where does all that go when you use Rhino or CAD? Or what do you think, Marina?
For me, all the process of creation for me is always made by my hand. My hands on my head. So I work mostly with like it without computer. I'm a old-fashioned.
We love that.
I prefer to do everything by hand and with my head. And sometimes it could happen that I have to modify something very quickly. So I use a scan and I modify a part of the jewelry. But finally, mostly of the time, I'm doing everything by hands.
From the point of view of the jewelry historian and also someone who produced jewels also in my different careers through Cartier, Tiffany, not Van Cleef & Arpels, I've always been a teacher, but it can be good to solve a problem like how a clasp connects. So sometimes for the functional aspects, the front part and the beauty part can be all you, but then some of the problem solving can be done with the computers, not so bad, right?
Yes, but with the team of jewelers too.
Yes, yes.
because I was working a lot with inside the workshop. And so I was formed by the jeweler.
And you really believe in that exchange back and forth. Sometimes, but for something like just how a clasp connects, but mostly it's about exactly what we've been talking about. These questions are so fantastic. I think we're going to have to answer them on some Instagram stories. How does Marina decide which stones, emerald versus ruby, to determine her decision?
In fact, at the beginning, we think about some stones because of the theme. But like you saw with Nouri the Cacatoès, it changes because on the stock of the Maison, there was a lot of blue sapphires, so I had to change. Yeah. So we have to think what's the best, but after we do like we could.
How long, one last question, and I think we're going to try to answer the rest of them on the Instagram. How long does it take from gouache to the final piece?
But what piece?
The final piece of jewelry. It can be years, right? Absolutely years.
To create...
Well, the Boucheron question mark was 10 years. The Chardon, the Van Cleef & Arpels Chardon was from 1920s to 2006. Yeah. So your design to when it's finally finished can be forever. But when you finish, from sketch to finished gouache, how long would it take you?
In fact, the process could take some months, many months, because it's a discussion between lots of persons. The jeweler, the creative director. So sometimes it could take more time, and it's around 3-6 months. 3 months it's very quick. 6 months it's longer, and sometimes 1 year. So it depends on the maison. There's maison who have a process very long because all the steps of the creation are quite precise. When you have to recut the stones to have the help of a sculptor modeler. When we saw with Husky the dog, the wolf. So sometimes it could take a long time, but for a ring it's more quick, and for a necklace it's very long.
Well, speaking of long, the people are waiting to come into the exhibition. We privatized the exhibition for you so that we could bring you in here from wherever you are today. We're going to say goodbye for now. Thank you very much. Stay in touch and do get onto that La Cloche exhibition and lecture that Nicola Luxinger and Mathilde are going to give on 16th and 17th December. Thank you.